I retired with $11,000 in my checking account. Everyone, my kids, my brother, even my barber, said I was done. They were wrong. But they had good reason to think that way. $11,000. That's what 50 years of working got me. My wife Martha had passed 2 years earlier. The medical bills ate through our savings like termites through old wood. The business partnership I'd trusted my brother-in-law with? Gone. He meant well, but good intentions don't pay the bills. So there I was at 65, sitting in my kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, staring at that bank statement. March 14th, 2017, 6:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I'd been up all night doing the math. Social Security would give me $1,847 a month. My house payment was $890. Property taxes, $220 a month. Utilities, groceries, gas, we're talking maybe $300 left over if I was careful. My son David called that Tuesday. Dad, maybe it's time to look at some of those senior communities. You know, where they take care of everything for you. Senior communities. Translation. You're done making decisions for yourself, Harold. Let other people handle your money now. My daughter Lisa was more direct. Dad, you need to be conservative with what you have left. Put it in a savings account. Don't take any risks. You can't afford to lose anything at your age. At my age, like 65 was 85. Like I was already dead and just hadn't figured it out yet. Here's what nobody tells you about retiring broke. It's not the money that kills you first. It's the way people start talking to you. Like you're a child again. Like every decision you make needs to be approved by someone younger and supposedly smarter. I went to see my bank manager, Tom Sullivan, at Fifth Third Bank on Main Street. Tom had handled my account for 12 years. Good man. But when I sat across from his desk and told him I needed to figure out how to make my money work harder, he gave me the same speech everyone else did. Harold, at your age, preservation is the key. We have a nice CD that'll give you 1.2% annually. Safe as houses. Safe as houses. You know what's safe as houses? Being broke slowly instead of being broke quickly. Because that CD was going to pay me about $130 a year on my $11,000, while inflation ate 3% of my purchasing power. I was going to get poorer, safely. Before I tell you what I did instead, what everyone called the stupidest decision a 65-year-old could make, I want you to do something. Write in the comments right now, I refuse to play it safe with my future. Not next month. Not after you think about it. Right now. Because what I'm about to tell you only works for people who decide that safe is actually the riskiest choice of all. I walked out of that bank knowing Tom meant well. They all meant well. But they were all wrong about one fundamental thing. They thought I was winding down. I wasn't winding down. I was starting over. Big difference. See, here's what happened in those first few months after I retired. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I sat in my living room, watched the morning news, ate breakfast at 8 a.m. like I had a schedule to keep, read the paper, maybe went to the grocery store. By noon, I was done. The whole day stretched ahead of me like a prison sentence. You know what the worst part was? The pity. The way the checkout girl at Kroger would smile when I used my senior discount card. The way my neighbors would ask, "How's retirement treating you, Harold?" with that careful tone people use around sick relatives. The way my own kids talked about my golden years, while clearly thinking I was in some kind of holding pattern until the inevitable. I tried everything the experts recommend. I volunteered at the hospital for 2 weeks, spending my time in a gift shop selling overpriced flowers to people who already had problems. I joined a senior center group that played pinochle every Thursday. sitting around tables with men who talked about their glory days like they were already dead. I even took a computer class at the library, where they taught us how to use email like it was advanced quantum physics. Every night, I'd sit at my kitchen table and run the numbers again. Social Security, check. House payment, check. Property taxes, utilities, groceries, gas. At the end of the month, maybe $200 left over. If nothing broke, if I didn't get sick, if the world stayed exactly the same price it was today. But the world doesn't stay the same price. In 6 months, my homeowner's insurance went up $43 a month. The city raised property taxes. Gas prices jumped 30 cents. My cushion was disappearing, and I hadn't even touched the principal. That's when I met Bill Kowalski. Bill was 72, fixing his own roof in the middle of a heat wave. I was walking by, one of those purposeless walks you take when you've got nowhere to be, and I stopped to ask if he needed help. Not because I'm handy with roofs, but because I was desperate for a conversation that wasn't about my health or the weather. Bill climbed down his ladder, wiped his face with a towel, and said something that changed everything. "Harold, you look like a man who's given up." I wanted to argue, but he was right. I had given up. I'd accepted that 65 meant the end of Harold Ashford making things happen and the beginning of Harold Ashford managing decline. Bill poured 2 glasses of iced tea and we sat on his porch. He told me his story. Retired from GM at 62 with a decent pension. Lost half of it when the company restructured. Wife got cancer, ate through their savings. At 67, he was down to his last $8,000. "So what did you do?" I asked. "The stupidest thing anyone my age could do," Bill said, and he smiled when he said it. "I took that $8,000 and I invested it." I nearly choked on my iced tea. "You invested? At 67? When you were almost broke?" "Harold, let me ask you something. What's the difference between losing your money slowly and losing your money quickly?" I thought about it. "Well, slowly gives you more time to..." "To what? To watch it disappear? To feel bad about it longer?" Bill leaned forward. "There's no difference. Broke is broke. The only difference is whether you go down fighting or you go down surrendering." That's when Bill told me something I'd never heard before. Something that contradicted everything Tom at the bank had said, everything my kids had said, everything every financial advisor in America tells people over 65. He told me about the zero savings law. "Saving money after 65 is the fastest way to go broke," Bill said, "because your money isn't working, it's dying. Every month it sits in that savings account, it's worth less than the month before. Inflation is eating it alive, and you're helping." Bill explained it like this. If you've got $11,000 in a savings account earning 1.2%, and inflation is running 3%, you're losing 1.8% of your purchasing power every year. In 10 years, that $11,000 will buy what $8,400 buys today. You didn't lose money. You lost the ability to live. I sat there on Bill's porch watching the sun go down, thinking about everything I'd been taught about money. Save for a rainy day. Don't take risks when you're older. Preserve your capital. It was all designed to help you die comfortably broke instead of dying uncomfortably broke. You're still here, listening to a 74-year-old man tell you that everything you've been taught about retirement money is wrong. Most people click away when someone challenges what they believe. You didn't. Hit subscribe. Bill didn't just tell me I was wrong. He showed me what right looked like. That $8,000 he'd invested at 67, he put it into dividend-paying stocks. Nothing fancy. Companies that had been paying dividends for decades. Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble. Companies that make things people need, whether the economy is good or bad. First year I made $280 in dividends, Bill said. That's more than my savings account paid me in 3 years. But here's the beautiful part. The next year, most of those companies raised their dividends. So I made $310. Year 3, $340. Not only was I making money, I was making more money every year. But that wasn't the best part. The stock prices went up too, Bill continued. Not every day, not every month, but over time. That $8,000 is worth about $15,000 now, 5 years later. And it's throwing off almost $500 a year in dividends that keep growing. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried, because I was excited for the first time in months. Bill had shown me something that nobody else had. The difference between managing decline and building for the future. But here's where it gets interesting. The next morning, I called my son David and told him what Bill had said. David works in insurance, makes good money, considers himself financially savvy. Dad, that's exactly what you can't do at your age. What if the market crashes? What if you lose it all? You don't have time to recover from mistakes. Then I called my daughter Lisa. Lisa's a nurse, practical, level-headed. Her response was almost identical. Dad, please don't do anything risky with what little you have left. Just keep it safe. Keep it safe. There's that phrase again. But Bill had planted a seed in my mind. What if safe is the riskiest thing you can do? I spent the next week at the library, not taking computer classes, but researching everything Bill had told me. I looked up dividend growth stocks. I learned about companies that have raised their dividends every year for 25 years straight. I studied inflation and how it affects fixed incomes. I read about something called the sequence of returns risk, how being too conservative early in retirement can actually ruin you. And then I made the decision everyone called stupid. On April 3rd, 2017, I walked into Tom's office at Fifth Third Bank and told him I wanted to invest $9,000 of my $11,000. Tom's face went white. Harold, I can't recommend that. The liability alone. If something goes wrong, if you lose that money. Tom, I said, I'm going to lose that money anyway. The only question is whether I lose it fast or slow. I'd rather go down swinging. That afternoon, I opened a brokerage account. I bought shares in 8 companies. All of them had paid dividends for at least 20 years. All of them sold things people needed. Food, medicine, household products, utilities. I kept $2,000 in checking for emergencies and put the rest to work. My kids didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. My brother called to ask if I was having some kind of breakdown. Tom at the bank shook his head every time I walked in. Even my barber Eddie tried to talk me out of it. Harold, men our age don't gamble with money. We're supposed to be wise now. But Bill supported me. Harold, you just did something 90% of people your age will never do. You chose to fight instead of surrender. Win or lose, you're fighting. The first month was terrifying. My account balance went up and down like a roller coaster. Some days I was up $300. Some days I was down $400. I started checking it obsessively, which Bill told me was the fastest way to drive myself crazy. Judge it by the year, not the day, he said. Dividends come quarterly. Growth comes annually. Panic comes daily if you let it. 6 months in, something beautiful happened. I got my first quarterly dividend check, $67.43. It wasn't much, but it was $67.43 I didn't have before. More importantly, it was $67.43 that came from owning something instead of just saving something. The second quarter, the dividend check was $71.20. One of my companies had raised their dividend. The third quarter, $73.95. Fourth quarter, $78.10. In my first year of stupid investing, I made $290.68 in dividends. That was more than double what Tom's CD would have paid me. But the real shock came when I looked at my account balance on April 3rd, 2018, exactly 1 year later. $11,347. My $9,000 investment was worth $11,347, and I'd collected almost $300 in dividends. In 1 year, I'd made more money than I'd made in 3 years of safe savings. But that was just the beginning. Something I discovered called the zero savings law changed everything for me. It says saving money after 65 is actually the fastest way to go broke. Sounds crazy, right? But when I tried what it suggested instead, everything changed in 90 days. It's all in the description. Year 2 was even better. Not only did my account balance grow to $12,890, but my dividends grew too. 4 of my 8 companies raised their dividends that year. My quarterly checks went from an average of $75 to an average of $89. I started reinvesting those dividends, buying more shares instead of taking the cash. Bill called it compound growth, and it was like watching money breed. But the real transformation wasn't financial, it was psychological. For the first time since Martha died, I had something to look forward to. Every quarter I'd get dividend statements in the mail. Every year I'd get annual reports from companies I partly owned. I wasn't just a consumer anymore, I was an owner. I started paying attention to business news. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. When Coca-Cola announced a new product line, I cared because I owned a piece of Coca-Cola. When Johnson & Johnson beat their earnings estimates, I smiled because that was partly my money at work. My neighbor Carl noticed the change. "Harold, you seem different, more, engaged?" Carl was right. I was engaged. For the first time in years, I was participating in my own future, instead of just managing my decline. But the real proof came in year 3. The market had a rough patch in late 2019. My account balance dropped from about $14,000 to $11,800 in 6 weeks. I got scared. I called Bill, ready to sell everything and cut my losses. "Harold," Bill said, "what did your companies do in those 6 weeks? Did Procter & Gamble stop making soap? Did Johnson & Johnson stop making bandages? Did people stop drinking Coca-Cola?" Of course they didn't. So why would you sell your ownership in profitable companies just because other people are panicking? Bill was right. I held on. By the end of 2019, my account was back to $14,300, and my quarterly dividends were averaging $105. Then 2020 happened. COVID hit, and the market went insane. In March 2020, my account dropped 35% in 3 weeks. $14,300 became $9,300. I was back where I'd started, and everyone who'd called my investing plan stupid felt vindicated. David called. "Dad, now you see why I told you to keep it safe." Lisa called. "Dad, can you at least sell what's left before you lose everything?" Even Eddie the barber shook his head when I came in for a haircut. "Harold, maybe it's time to admit this didn't work out." But Bill gave me different advice. "Harold, look at your dividend checks. Did they stop coming?" They hadn't. In fact, in the first quarter of 2020, even with the chaos, I received $112 in dividends, more than I'd ever received in a single quarter. "Your companies are still profitable," Bill said. "People are buying more soap, more bandages, more household products than ever. The stock prices are panicking, but the businesses are fine. This is when you buy more, not when you sell." That was the moment I truly understood what Bill had been teaching me. I wasn't gambling. I was owning pieces of businesses that made things people needed. The stock prices were just the market's opinion of what those businesses were worth on any given day. But the businesses themselves, the factories, the products, the customers, those were real. So I did something that shocked everyone, including myself. I took another $1,000 from my emergency fund and bought more shares. While everyone else was selling, I was buying. While everyone else was panicking, I was shopping. By June 2020, my account had recovered to $13,800. By December, it was at $16,200. Those shares I'd bought during the panic, they were the most profitable purchase I'd ever made, and the dividends kept growing. Fourth quarter 2020, $126. My quarterly dividend income had grown 68% in less than 4 years. But here's what really convinced me I'd made the right choice. In January 2021, I ran into my old bank manager, Tom Sullivan, at the grocery store. "Harold," he said, "I've been wondering how that investment plan worked out for you." I told him. I showed him my latest statement on my phone. $16,200 in account value, plus almost $500 a year in growing dividends. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Harold, I owe you an apology. I was trying to protect you from risk, but I was actually protecting you from opportunity. What you did took guts." That's when I realized something important. The financial advice most people get isn't designed to make them wealthy. It's designed to make them comfortable with being not wealthy. There's a difference. By 2022, my account had grown to $23,400. My quarterly dividends were averaging $165. In 5 years, I'd more than doubled my money and created an income stream that grew every year. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was personal. I wasn't that defeated 65-year-old man sitting in his kitchen anymore, managing decline and waiting to die. I was a 70-year-old man who owned pieces of profitable businesses and had a growing income stream that didn't depend on the government or anyone else's charity. My relationship with my kids changed too. They stopped talking to me like I was a fragile old man who needed protection from his own decisions. They started asking for advice. David called in late 2022. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you did. Maybe you could teach me about dividend investing?" Lisa was more direct. "Dad, I was wrong. What you did wasn't stupid, it was brave." But the best validation came from an unexpected source. I was at Home Depot buying some weather stripping. Yes, at 72, I was still maintaining my own house and planning for the future, when I overheard 2 men in their 60s talking in the next aisle. "I don't know what to do, Frank. I've got $40,000 sitting in savings, earning nothing. But my advisor says I'm too old to invest, says I should play it safe." I almost walked away. It wasn't my business. But I thought about Bill Kowalski, sitting on his porch 5 years earlier, taking the time to challenge a defeated man's assumptions. I walked around the corner and introduced myself. "Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing. I'm Harold Ashford. I retired with $11,000 8 years ago. I'm worth over $150,000 now, and I earn more in dividends than most people make working part-time. You want to know how?" Those 2 men, Frank and Jerry, listened for 40 minutes in the parking lot of Home Depot while I explained what Bill had taught me, what I'd learned, and what they could do if they had the courage to stop playing it safe. 6 months later, Frank called me. "Harold, I did what you suggested. Started with $10,000. I'm already up $800, and I just got my first dividend check for $47. My wife thinks I'm a genius. Jerry took longer to convince himself, but he started with $5,000 and got similar results. That's when I realized I needed to put everything I'd learned in one place. Every lesson Bill taught me, every mistake I made along the way, every principle that actually worked when conventional wisdom failed. Look, I'm 74. I'm not trying to build a business or sell courses. I just put down the 7 things that actually worked. Called it the Wealth After 65 Code. If it helps you skip even one of the years I wasted, that's enough for me. Link below. Today, my investment account is worth $187,000. My quarterly dividends average $685. That's $2,740 a year in income that grows whether I work or not, whether I'm healthy or sick, whether the government changes Social Security or not. But more than that, I proved something to myself and everyone who counted me out. 65 is not the end. It's the starting line. The man who retired with $11,000 and let everyone convince him to play it safe would be dead broke by now, living on Social Security and food stamps, apologizing for taking up space in the world. The man who made the stupid decision to fight instead of surrender owns pieces of profitable businesses, earns growing income from his investments, and helps other people discover what's possible when you refuse to accept what everyone says is inevitable. Do me a favor, write in the comments, "I start now." 3 words, that's all. Because starting is the hardest part, and you just did it. They told me I was too old to start over. Now I'm too wealthy to care what they think.